So let's talk about valence electrons. Valence electrons are the things in chemistry, the little subatomic particles that make pretty much everything happen. And before we get going, let's just kind of clarify, all electrons are the same. What makes a valence electron different is its location, not that it's a different type of electron. It is the electrons that are furthest from the nucleus, the outer orbit electrons. And it turns out that pretty much every atom really wants to have 8 electrons in its outermost ring. The picture over there, you got sodium. So sodium has an atomic number of 11. It has 11 protons and it also has 11 electrons. And so you're going to have 2 electrons in that first ring, like all atoms have. Then you're going to have 8 in the next ring. And then you're actually going to have 1 electron left. And so you see in that outermost circle there, that 1 valence electron, that's a bit of a problem for sodium because it turns out sodium wants to have 8 electrons in that outermost ring. And so either it needs to gain 7 electrons somehow, which is not super likely to happen, or what tends to happen a lot with things that have 1 or 2 valence electrons in their outer ring, it might give up that electron. And so something like, let's say, a chlorine atom might just pick up sodium's valence electron, kind of steal it or transfer it, right? And if that happens, the sodium will become a positive sodium ion, and the chlorine, which has gained that extra negative from the sodium, becomes negative. And they will stick together because we know positives and negatives stick together. Kind of think of it as like that sodium wants that electron back, and so it gets stuck onto that chloride ion. And so you end up making sodium chloride, which is what we know is table salt. If you look at those other atoms that I have down in the picture, so you've got lithium there in the front. Lithium has 3 protons, 3 electrons, and so you're going to have 2 electrons in that first orbit, so that orbit's happy, but then you've only got 1 in that outermost ring. And so lithium, just like sodium, is likely to behave by giving up that electron. And so a lot of times if you hear lithium, you'll hear it referred to as a lithium ion, like for instance, the lithium ion batteries in your cell phone. If you look over at carbon there, now carbon's an interesting one because carbon has 4 valence electrons. Its atomic number is 6. It's got 2 in that first ring and then it's got 4 in the outer ring. And so carbon is not super likely to give up one of its valence electrons because it's got a pretty good pull on them. They're kind of evenly balanced. So carbon's much more likely to share each of its 4 valence electrons with something else, which creates what we call a covalent bond. And so carbon is what we call a tetravalent, meaning 4 valence electrons, a tetravalent atom that likes to form 4 covalent bonds. And this is really cool for carbon because it makes it a really awesome structural molecule. It's like a Lego that can build on every side. And it also makes it really good at storing energy, like in hydrocarbons or carbohydrates, because each one of those covalent bonds that it forms can store a little bit of potential energy that can be used when those bonds are broken. If you look at the next one there, you got oxygen. Oxygen has an atomic number of 8. It has 2 valence electrons in the first ring, and then it has 6 in the outer ring, which means oxygen wants to make 2 bonds. It's not likely to give up any of those electrons. It's got a pretty strong hold on each of those. And so oxygen is far more prone to form 2 bonds with something else. In fact, oxygen's got a pretty strong electronegative pull. So if oxygen interacts with 2 hydrogens, I'm sure we all know H2O, those hydrogens will share their electrons with oxygen, so they get their first ring with 2, and oxygen gets to share hydrogen's electron, and so it satisfies that octet rule with 8 electrons in the outer ring. It doesn't tend to break apart that much. And speaking of happy molecules there, the last one over there is neon. So neon is one of what we call the noble gases. Neon actually has an atomic number of 10, so 10 protons, but also 10 electrons. So 2 in the first ring, 8 in the next ring. It has all 8 that it needs. The octet rule is satisfied. And that's one of the reasons why neon is not super likely to make very many chemical reactions because it's pretty happy it has all of its 8 electrons present. So keep in mind, those valence electrons are the driving force behind whether an atom is going to make an ionic bond or a covalent bond. If it has a very small or a very large number of electrons in its valence ring, it tends to kind of pull or give up electrons. So something like the sodium and the chloride we talked about before, that actually causes those atoms to become ions. Ions are anything that has a charge. We've talked in other videos about cations and anions. And so you end up getting a really strong attraction between different ionically bonded molecules. And so something like sodium and chloride, they have a pretty good attractive force between them. In fact, the ionic bonds are the strongest of the bonds. Covalent bonds are actually what we work with more in biology because they're so common in the interactions between the different molecules that we're working with, things like proteins, things like nucleic acids. These are held together by covalent bond structures. And so covalent bonds, remember, that's when the electrons get shared. Covalent bond formation is usually predictable if you know things about the different atoms that you're working with. Some atoms are just more prone to making covalent bonds. Things like carbon and oxygen, really, really common that they are going to form covalent bonds. And it's also important because a lot of covalent bonds, in order for them to form or in order for them to break, you have to have other molecules working with them, things like enzymes that will either put together or pull apart those covalent bonds. Because in order to get those atoms, those nuclei, to get close enough together to share the electrons, we usually have some sort of input of energy or some sort of enzyme that's going to kind of force that to happen. Now, something else to keep in mind, that hydrogen bond down there on the left. So hydrogen bonds, usually referred to as the third type of bonding, it's not really a true bond. It's really more of an attraction between molecules. And we're going to talk about this here at the end. But this also still has something to do with those valence electrons and how many valence electrons are not stuck on anything and they're kind of present, sticking out there in space. And it's going to give you what we call partial charges. It's really just the interactions between things that have electrons kind of offset. It can make molecules stick to other molecules. It's actually what holds together the nucleic bases for DNA. So it holds the A's, T's, G's, and C's together in the middle of a DNA strand. That's actually hydrogen bonds. And the cool thing about that is they're not really a bond. And so it doesn't take all that much to kind of pull apart that attractive force. You're not going to have a lot of energy released or gained in the process. And so in chemistry, specifically in organic chemistry, this is going to come up a whole lot. You have to kind of think of the shape of the molecule and to see where the electrons are actually located.